Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next Star Wars video. This is going to be my review for Star Wars The Bad Batch Episode 2. I think the episode was called Cut and Run, obviously a reference to Cut Lawquane, because we do in fact return to Cut in this episode. So, yeah, normal length episode here, like 24 minutes overall I think was the runtime, not really including the credits. And yeah, a pretty solid episode. Obviously, it didn't quite have the impact, I suppose, of the first episode, just because the first episode had like Order 66. It was the opener, the premiere. They gave us like 3 episodes in one. This is our first more one-off episode. And so they did what I think they probably had to do given the situation, which was to do this arc where Hunter feels they need to find somewhere safe to just kind of leave Omega. That Omega can't come with them, can't have the life that they're going to have, that she as a kid should, grow up in a kind of different way. And so you can see on his side of things he's trying to help her, but the whole point of this episode is that she actually wants to be with Hunter, with the Bad Batch. And so that was the significance of sort of why we got this episode, what the episode was about in terms of that character development for Hunter and I suppose Omega, of just, Hunter sort of learning to be a kind of father figure properly to her. And then especially at the end, Omega not going with Cut and Sue, and instead coming back to join the Bad Batch. So you kind of needed to do this episode now. It would have been weird to try and maybe bring this up later on, where if you got to Cut in like say episode 11 or 12 instead of one of the earlier episodes, it would have kind of felt weird. Instead, doing it quite early on allows you to have this arc of, before they're super close, just understanding what Omega sort of wants, and she wants to be with them, and that's the main point. Now, it is interesting that, two of the big Star Wars things right now are dealing with effectively the same type of character arc, character dynamic, which is, of course, character unexpectedly has to sort of become a father figure to a kind of mysterious younger character who has a lot of questions and theories revolving around them in terms of Din and Grogu, and now Hunter, I suppose the overall Bad Batch, and Omega. A lot of questions with this series effectively amount to, what is the full deal with Omega? Is she just a female clone and happens to be part of the Bad Batch? Or is there more to her than meets the eye? There probably likely is. In the same way that with Din and Grogu, a lot of the questions in that series revolved around what's the deal with Grogu? Why is he force sensitive? As well as, I suppose, still ongoing sort of more about his species, which we still haven't learned about, but it is what it is. So, that just kind of makes it feel like a little bit like, okay, could you not have tried to do some other type of dynamic as the main thing? But it's fine. It works. There's a reason people are connecting with this series, and it's because this is a dynamic that is ultimately going to work. Now, if they start doing lots of other series where they're playing off the exact same dynamic, maybe then it sort of starts to become repetitive, but, it's only the second attempt, so I don't have too much of a problem right now, because I assume as we go forward, they are going to do things sort of slightly differently in that Omega is not like a complete, very small child, almost baby-like Grogu. No, she is going to have an arc, a story of her own, and that immediately does change things. The question is obviously just, what is it? The more and more I think about it, the more and more I think that the situation that they're going for with Omega in terms of connecting her name and everything is that the Bad Batch were experiments. Yes, they're called like defects and stuff like that by a lot of the other clones, but fundamentally they were experiments that ultimately sort of succeeded. And Omega's clearly not the last ever clone produced, so she is potentially the last major experiment that they did. So if they're able to, with cloning Jango, make the clones stronger, Wrecker, more intelligent, tech, better like eyesight, crosshairs, and better senses, Hunter, then Omega is obviously a test that, okay, You can have female clones of Django. That's one thing, but I doubt that's the big reveal. It would make sense that we need to at some point build towards the idea of force sensitive cloning. And while it hasn't really been confirmed yet and it's just rumors, I get the feeling that might be the direction that they're kind of going in terms of if she is just a female clone, like what is the significance really behind her being here? Like obviously it creates the kind of father-daughter dynamic, but there needs to be something more there. And so it fits with the idea that like okay, it theoretically was impossible before to clone force sensitives, otherwise why wouldn't you have just done that? But what better way to advance cloning than to over and over again clone and research cloning on the same DNA, the same person? And so realistically in the history of Kamino, have they ever cloned someone as much as they've cloned Django? If they can't clone and alter Django, then they can't clone and alter anyone. So if it works with Django, it'll unlock basically these new aspects of cloning for the Kaminoans. So, like I said, the Bad Batch ultimately you would say are kind of successful clones in the grand scheme of things in terms of these specific traits that they've now made work. Why not force sensitivity? Because I get the feeling we might eventually get back to Kamino and you know, address how I'm guessing the Empire at some point will basically be like, yep, the deal is over. We won't be purchasing any more clones. We're done with you. And you're kind of waiting for some sort of twist on the Kamino side of things to see like, oh, this is a plan that we had, or this will keep us in play. And maybe force sensitive cloning is in fact what we want, because you do eventually have to set up a lot of the sequel stuff, and you know, the whole Snoke project is kind of the way to do that. That if Omega is the first ever force sensitive clone, it fits this idea that you know, it's possible for Palpatine to make a clone of himself. We'll see how that goes, how they get about doing that. It's going to involve, of course, introducing Palpatine in this series. You know, more Tarkin, potentially Vader, which I'd be shocked if we don't see Vader at some point, just because they had that model from the Clone Wars Season 7 that looked really good right at the end. I'd be shocked if they don't use it again. So, yeah. I surprisingly don't have too much to say about Kut and Sue and the kids. It was like nice to see them again because, of course, that was like a mid-season 2 episode. So it's been quite a while, like hundreds of episodes, really. 100 plus episodes really since we've seen these guys in or around. And I think the main thing was just like that, okay, they know about them. How did they know about them? In that they do kind of imply that, okay, Rex was here the day before. They just barely miss Rex. That fits. Rex was in the episode The Deserter. Rex met Kut. How do the other clones know about it? Because Echo doesn't seem to know, that the Bad Batch were the ones who were like, we actually know Kut. Echo is the one who doesn't, which was a little bit of a surprise. So, somewhere along the way, they came across Kut, but then they also did kind of imply that, like, other clones had come to see them at some point, so maybe it's just like a specific group of clones happened to be familiar with Kut, but the point is, the Bad Batch had a familiarity with him, which was interesting to learn about. Just that immediately, you know, the Uncle Wrecker is what the kids call Wrecker, so there's that. And it was interesting because when they landed, you had Omega reacting to being on a planet outside of Kamino for the first time. And this is where it gets into the idea, yeah, Kamino is basically a facility above water. Otherwise, it's just water and rain all day, every day. This is her first time ever being on solid ground, like on Earth of a planet. That's really interesting that we got to see this. This was definitely the sort of Rey on, was it Taco Dana? Bana? I forget the name of the planet, because it really stands out, obviously, in the sequels, that planet. But, you know, that Rey moment of, like, her seeing a planet that wasn't Jakku for, like, the first time. Here, it's almost even more extreme on the other side of things, in that Rey at least knows what the ground is like. Omega's only used to this like facility, a kind of man-made thing. So her seeing dirt was kind of a kind of fun moment. Her getting to play with the other kids and get used to that dynamic. Just there's a lot that she has to learn because she's been very isolated, a very specific upbringing. And so, you have the moments of her getting in trouble, being a kid, exploring where she's kind of not really meant to. And that was the whole dynamic that they got across, is that she's not a soldier. She's not going to follow their orders exactly. She'll do things that are kind of unexpected, and the solution is not to, as a commander, kind of put her down, but as her guardian, basically, to, protect her. And so just that moment of Kut calming down Omega after the animal nearly killed her, and this sort of teaching Hunter, this is the approach that you should take. And it being, like I said earlier on, just that learning kind of arc for Hunter in terms of how to handle a character being on his team who is not necessarily a soldier. But it still remains like, where are we going with this? Because this works for now. But, like, are we getting, like, 10 episodes of this? Because, again, like, we've got, 14 episodes left, I think. Again, I don't know if the first episode is just considered 1 or it's actually considered 3. But we've got close to 10 episodes or over 10 episodes to go at this point. So, what is the situation going forward? Obviously, like I said earlier, like, we're going to have stuff like Fennec Shan appear. We're going to have other episodes where we reference characters that we're somewhat familiar with along the way. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if, like, they come across Hondo and stuff like that. If we eventually do maybe meet Rex or someone like that. Like I said, the idea of, like, Gregor or Wolf. I think Wolf would kind of be, I suppose, maybe a kind of fitting character in terms of, I don't think we actually know the story of how he ends up with Gregor, and I don't think we know a lot of the backstory surrounding that, how that group exactly came together, but the Bad Batch meeting one or two of those characters would kind of fit for sure. But, Tarkin, I suppose, is going to have to come back into play. More stuff on Kamino. One thing this episode did do is that we did get the scene of Omega talks with the inhibitor chip, and Tech is just like, oh, I thought it was obvious from the fact that I said that there's programming, that there was a chip involved. So now they have it in their heads that, oh, programming, chip, when are they going to figure the whole thing out and realize that they can maybe get Crosshairs back if they deactivate or take out the chip? That's going to have to come out, I suppose, at some point. And that's why I think them meeting a Rex would obviously unlock that for them, or Gregor or Wolf, depending on how they got their chips out. That would be kind of quite interesting if they go down that path. Because, like, Wolf, like I said, is Plo Koon's commander. Plo Koon is killed in his starship, so did Wolf... I don't think... I get the impression Wolf didn't do that, so when exactly did that come about? But I think Wolf also has, like, an injury, and he has, like, some cybernetic stuff going on, so that might affect his chip. He might be fine just by default. It could be cool. Like, imagine we got a flashback to, like, Wolf and Plo Koon and, like, how he removes the chip or something like that. That would be interesting. So I wouldn't be surprised if they went down that road of, like, using the Bad Batch as the way to explain Gregor and Wolf's side of things. But that's further down the line, I guess. Yeah, where are we going to go from here is a little bit kind of interesting. And that I assume Kut is going to be safe. I'd be shocked if we kind of come back to him anytime soon. If we do get a second season, maybe we'll see him again there. But yeah, they're just sort of on the run. Like, they're completely out of the Empire. So it removes any sort of, I suppose, stealth type of things of them trying to just act like they're regular clones. But it does mean that the Empire is to a degree after them. Probably what we're waiting for, I think, at this point is the villain's sort of reaction to this. Like, is Tarkin going to be like, we need to hunt down this team, and for what reason? Like, we're kind of waiting for, like, Palpatine to contact Tarkin and be like, make sure you get the Bad Batch because I need Omega. And that would be like, oh, like Palpatine sees Omega as being important, or Tarkin sees Omega as being important, or Vader. You know, something like that is kind of, I think, probably what's needed next. Just to get across that, like, is the Empire going to care too much that a handful of clones are out on their own? Sure, if they find them, if they come across them, yeah, arrest them because they're kind of treasonous clones. But if there is a major manhunt, an explanation is sort of needed, because we sort of know the Bad Batch is kind of important because they're experiments. We sort of know Omega is important for reasons, but they need to bring those reasons to light, of course. So I think I'm going to wrap up the video there. Yeah, we'll see where this goes. I think next week's episode is going to be kind of a really important one. Like, now that you've got a lot of the initial dynamics out of the way, as well as one of the major, like, obvious characters that the group can go to see, what next? Because I'm assuming they're not going to go straight to Fennec and have all the Mandalorian references. So I'm waiting to see what kind of just a more regular episode of this show actually looks like, in terms of, are we going to get some of the more kind of slightly fillery type episodes that we've got in, say, at times like early Clone Wars, or throughout Star Wars Rebels, or even like one or two of the episodes of The Mandalorian, where there's not much plot going on, but it's just, you know, they land on this planet, X thing happens, they get away. What are those episodes like? Do they really affect the series? Or have they made an effort in this series to make every episode hit in some way? Because this one, I think, did hit and was quite good, but we have to wait and see, just because we haven't got really into the full, I think, exact meat of the story, in terms of, I don't think we have a great impression for where we're heading. Like, what does the finale, the season 1 finale of this show actually look like? What are we trying to accomplish? It's very hard to picture that right now, because it could go kind of anywhere from here. All we know is that we're probably going to get a few land on planets, X things happens, but we don't know the main thing that's going to happen. So yeah, they're my thoughts on the episode in the comments. Let me know what your thoughts are, but that has been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.